Hello there. This is Mr. Mechnick. Welcome to Biology and your first podcast of the school year. Very excited to be your teacher this semester, and I just wanted to introduce to you how we're going to be using podcasts all year long and why these are going to be a beneficial tool for you and for me to tell what you're learning this year. So first off, if you haven't used a podcast, it's a simple media that you can watch and listen to at any time during the day. So whenever you feel like you have an urge to learn biology, find one of my podcasts and you can follow along. So we'll be using podcasts this year as a tool to basically deliver a lot of content information, to give you background information on labs that we'll be doing. And I would recommend that you use a 2-column note-taking system to record information in your notebook. This is not intended for your lab notebook. This is a regular notebook. You can use loose leaf paper to record information, but I would title the topic in one column that we're going to be covering, and then maybe another column for questions that you have. So when you come back to class the next day, we can use these questions to kind of guide where we're going during that class. So today we are going to be beginning our first lesson and trying to define life. And life has been this mysterious thing for so long. It's been a difficult thing for people to define. Life, for a long time people believed that life could arise from non-living things. So there was a very strong theory that was widely accepted in the 16th and 17th century called spontaneous generation that meant life could just generate from nothing. But it wasn't until the 17th century where a scientist by the name of Francisco Redi performed an experiment to basically try to disprove this idea that life could just not come out of nowhere. And what he did was one of the first controlled experiments. So his experiment basically was, well, if we left meat sit out on a counter for a long period of time, we would ultimately see these flies come in contact with the meat, and all of a sudden maggots, which are the fly larvae, start growing on them. So people believe that the larvae or the maggots actually appeared from the meat. So his experiment that he conducted was, well, let's cover the meat with this film, a screen, and let's run the same experiment and see what happens. And over the course of several days, the flies still swarmed the meat. They were attracted towards the scent of it, but they could not come in contact with it, and maggots did not appear on the covered meat. As a result, he was able to conclude maggots form only when flies come in contact with the meat. Spontaneous generation of maggots did not occur. So this was very good evidence to kind of disprove the theory of spontaneous generation. However, science doesn't work that easy, so other scientists had to try to basically show that life could not regenerate from nothing. Lazzaro Spallanzani tried another experiment to disprove spontaneous generation. And he did this once we actually understood a little bit about bacteria and microorganisms. So he used a sterilization process to boil large flasks filled with this nutrient gravy, as we're calling it, and the flask that was left unopened continued to grow with microorganisms. It became very cloudy after several days. The flask that was sealed at the top did not allow for the bacteria to generate, which basically was showing that in order for life to generate, it needed a medium to live in. But if we did not allow life to come in contact with it, it could not regenerate itself. So still people were skeptical of the whole concept that life could just not arise from nothing. So Louis Pasteur was the gentleman that kind of put this whole entire spontaneous generation theory to rest. And he did a similar experiment as Spallanzani did, and he found that by boiling this broth in a flask with a curved neck, and he kept that neck open to the air, so air could still get in here, but the bacteria were not able to make its way in from the air into the flask. So it basically showed that the air is filled with these microorganisms, and it wasn't the broth or the gravy that contained the microorganisms that allowed the life to arise. And the broth eventually became teeming with microorganisms after that curved neck was removed and the microorganisms from the air could enter into this. So all of this research and experimentation over hundreds of years disproved the theory of spontaneous generation. And ultimately, scientists were able to be convinced that living things, no matter how small they are, do not come from living things. The present theory of where living things come from is called biogenesis. This theory states that living things come from other living things. And so when we talk about life and living things, we really need to be able to understand how we can define life. So here are the 8 characteristics of life. And again, some scientists might not agree with these 8 and might question what really defines life. And that's something we will talk about in class. But in general, most scientists agree that there are 8 characteristics of life. And number 1 on the list is that the smallest unit of life is a cell. So all living things have to be made up of cells. The second thing, in order for biogenesis to occur, living things need to be able to reproduce. They can either reproduce sexually or they can reproduce asexually. It doesn't really matter as long as they can pass on their genetic information from parent to offspring. Speaking of that genetic information, all living things must contain a genetic code. So in order for something to be alive, it needs to contain some form of genetic material. It's either in the form of DNA or in the form of RNA, but it doesn't matter which type as long as it has some type of genetic basis. The fourth thing on the list is that all living things must grow and develop. So as things develop, they're going to also grow. We can look at changing in shape and structure. We can look at cells. As cells divide and replicate, they're going to differentiate and become very specialized and perform different functions. But all living things, no matter what, must be able to grow and develop. So I know for myself, I need lots of energy to make it through the day. And in order to get energy, I enjoy eating. I really do. I mean, nothing wrong with a good chocolate chip cookie every day or a bowl of ice cream at night. I enjoy getting some good calories in my system. And I try to burn those calories because I metabolize those sugars. But I need them. So animals eat to obtain energy. Plants, on the other hand, they use sunlight to photosynthesize. They can use their energy in that respect. All living things also have to be able to respond to their environment. So some type of stimulus sends a signal and that living organism has some type of response to it. And the last two, all living things need to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is a fun word. That's one of those words that you guys should know and understand. It basically means that you need to maintain internal balance. So when you start feeling sick, when you're running a fever, you have an upset stomach, your body might not be maintaining internal balance, and we could say that you are not feeling well. The last one on the list, maybe the most important, but all living things must be able to change over time, and we call this evolution. So living things have to be able to evolve over long periods of time. If they can't, they become extinct. And we have really good records of things that once lived on this planet. And as we sit here today, the number of things becoming extinct every single year that you are alive is a very astounding number. So living things have to be able to adapt. They have to be able to cope with their environment. And if they do this for long periods of time, we call this biological evolution. So in biology, we study life, and there's a lot of areas of biology. So, this is a survey class in biology. We survey a lot of areas of biology. So hopefully you can find some area of interest. So we talk about the branches of biology. These are the specific areas which biologists could specialize in. And there's a lot more than what I have here, but I would expect you to know that zoology is the study of animals. Cytology is the study of cells. Botany, studying plants. Entomology, the study of insects. Ichthyology, the study of fishes. Genetics, study of heredity. The list goes on and on and on. So here's 3 more that maybe you can guess as to what these are. And most of these are ones that we will cover in this class this semester. in biology. And when we talk about life, we can look at how life is organized from very simple single-celled organisms all the way up to complex living organisms and how they interact with one another in larger groups. So we can go all the way back to Science 9 when you learned about atoms and you learned about elements. Well, atoms are the building blocks of material. So if you join a bunch of atoms together, you can make up molecules. These molecules are essential for building cells. The cell is the basic unit of life. You need to have a cell in order to have life. Different types of cells can join together to form tissues within organisms, and you put a bunch of tissues together and you can actually have an organ system. And these organ systems can work together to make up a body system, which ultimately make up that organism. Organisms living together in the same environment make up a population, and multiple populations of different species living together is called a community. So communities involve all of the living things within a certain defined space. And if we look at how the living world interacts with the non-living world, we can refer to this as an ecosystem. So in this picture, it shows the elephants with trees, and it shows land and shows water. All of these interact together in a way to make up an ecosystem, and all living things combined together make up the biosphere. So these are the levels of organization, and this semester we are going to work our way from small to large as we go through this biology course. So thank you for listening to your first podcast. If you want to spend a little time going through and review, can you answer these simple 8 questions or fill in the blanks with information that we have just covered in this presentation? Bring your notes to class tomorrow. We will discuss. I will ask some questions, and hopefully you'll be able to understand a little bit more about biology as a result of this podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.